Right. Hello. Hello, Nick. Hello, Mo.
Hi.
Thank you both so much for sitting down with me today to chat about all things related to hearing. I thought maybe before we start going into some of the particulars, I could share with you what a lot of people are looking for online. And maybe, first of all, you could just tell me this true, false, or it depends if it's not either, a couple of these, and then we'll go through them. Okay. So people have a lot of things that they are wondering online. One thing is only older people experience hearing loss. True or false?
Definitely false.
False. Yeah.
Okay, hearing loss is only caused by loud noises.
False.
False.
Hearing aids make hearing loss worse.
False.
False.
People with hearing loss can't communicate effectively.
People with hearing loss can't. I mean, that's false.
False, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Hearing loss is not a serious health concern.
False.
False.
Hearing loss only affects the ears and not the overall health.
Very false.
False.
Hearing loss is a normal part of aging and cannot be prevented.
True in
True,
a
yeah.
sense. Some people are luckier than others.
Hearing loss is always a sign of cognitive decline.
False.
False.
Okay, and the last one, which I thought was quite funny that a lot of people are wondering, is people with hearing loss can simply turn up the volume to hear better.
False.
Okay. I mean, I think we've all probably experienced a situation where somebody might be struggling to hear us and we speak louder. No. Okay, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you both for being good sports and going through that. Shall we start with hearing loss solution?
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
For sure.
Okay, so hearing aids have obviously changed dramatically in the last number of years. And something that I keep hearing, excuse the pun, is that when it comes to hearing aid, that they are well fitted, well optimized. So maybe we could start with hearing aids and maybe how they've advanced in the last number of years.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, well, I started fitting hearing aids over 20 years ago in the health service. So to put things into context, we were using screwdrivers and, tiny little jeweler screwdrivers to make little adjustments and changes to the tone controls. Where now, we've gone through an area of analog to digital and everything's done and programmed on computer platforms through software. So, even in what I think is a relatively short space of time, technology has moved on massively.
A lot of people they ask questions like when I'm looking online, I see about, batteries, recharging, comfort. What would you say to that maybe, Mo, when somebody comes in here?
I think a lot of hearing aids, say a few years ago, were battery operated. So if you think about the ease of use for hearing aids, batteries can sometimes be really, really small. So a lot of people did struggle, but lithium ion technology has really kind of opened doors and made it easier, just to bring in patients who would have really struggled before, but now, that struggle's completely gone.
So explain that a little to me. What?
So lithium ion, it's the batteries that we have on our phones, for example. So iPhones at the back will have lithium ion batteries, which are rechargeable. These days, hearing aids just go into a little port, leave them overnight, and then the next day, fully charged, ready to go into your ears.
And so does that affect then the size of the hearing aid?
It can do. I mean, I think, sometimes a rechargeable hearing aid is slightly bigger than a hearing aid which would have a battery, for example. But there are advantages and there are disadvantages. I think there's more advantages in favor of rechargeable hearing aids because the patient doesn't have to fiddle. So, someone, for example, with poor dexterity will cope much better with a rechargeable hearing aid. But you'll always have to remember to take a charger with you when you
Yeah.
go away, where you could source a packet of batteries quite easily in a shop. But I think it's interesting to see behaviors of manufacturers change. For example, one of the big manufacturers has recently decided not to make hearing aids with batteries that you can change anymore. Their latest line of hearing aids is all rechargeable. And I think that there's some sort of almost commitment to
It's like the green energy,
green
like
energy, net zero carbon emissions, and yeah, like we're all for that. But
mm,
some of our very old clients, existing clients, they prefer the batteries. That's their comfort blanket. That's what they know that they can source easily. So it's a conversation we have to have with everyone.
the other good thing as well is the technology is advancing as well. So when rechargeable hearing aids came out for the first time, we'll probably all remember the zinc air batteries.
Yeah.
You know, they won't last the whole day. So you have patients in the restaurants, for example, and suddenly hearing aids are gone. They're not working anymore. So it leaves you in a really, really awkward situation because you're thinking, you weren't expecting it, and it happens always at the worst times. Fast forwarding to today, batteries for hearing aids can last, I think, with a single charge up to 40 hours. So it's a lot more reliable. You can depend on it much, much more with a lot of confidence.
So, it's thinking about technology and hearing aids. I think some people hear some people hear the word technology and they maybe have a bit of fear. They think, oh my goodness, that's going to be too difficult. I don't want that. So is there options then for right across the spectrum for, say, like easiest to use?
I mean, a lot of the technology that we're working with now, I mean, hearing aids are computers and they have operating systems. They adjust themselves. They actually require very little user interaction. So we can reassure our patients that if they don't want to fiddle, they don't have to. They can just put them in and trust the technology. But interestingly, the modern consumer of hearing aids, of course, maybe someone who's younger, will want an app that connects to their hearing aid so that they can self-adjust or change programs. We can give these tools to the clients if they want them. We normally give these tools, these apps to our clients as a matter of course. But if they come back and they say, well, I don't really use it very much, we're cool with that because they shouldn't technically need to.
The thing I think the word technology can sometimes scare people because it seems like, it's full of lots of things that can change and lots of things you have to handle and manually change yourself. But to be honest, the technology is there to make your life easier, not harder. So yes, the hearing aids are working faster, they're working more powerful, they're doing more things. It doesn't necessarily mean there's more manual kind of control needed from the end user. So it's there to make your life easier, especially with AI. The hearing aids are nowadays thinking for themselves. So you don't necessarily need to, put the volume up if you go to the restaurant, or if there's a loud ambulance going by, you don't need to put the volume down. It will do it by itself, basically.
We try to hear on the fitting of a hearing aid, make it very interactive. We've always had the belief that we include the patient in the journey. We don't hide the software from them. I actually encourage the patient to look at the software of their hearing aid when we program it. So we can explain how the hearing aid changes and adapts in lots of different listening situations without them needing to interact with the device at all.
Yeah, it's amazing. Could you talk a bit more about like how they have changed though in terms of AI? Because that to me just sounds incredible that I could be walking around and if I had a pair of hearing aids that they would start adjusting to my environment because I can say, and I'm sure most people feel this even before you have any hearing, say, loss issues, that you can be walking around and there's loud noises and there's quiet noises. And I'm thinking, wow, this would be amazing if something was adjusting.
It is really good. It's really clever the way it works. So modern hearing aids are kind of analyzing the environment hundreds and hundreds of times a second. So if you go into the restaurant, for example, the AI will, let's say it determines that the noise is coming from the right side. It will tell the other hearing aid the noise is coming from the right side. Both of them will then shift their microphone focus to try and find the speaker and try and block out the noise. And all of this, again, is happening all automatically. It happens in the background, so sometimes you don't actually appreciate how complex these things are. The thing with the app as well, you can force the hearing aid to do certain things as well if you wanted to. So you can force the hearing aid to turn off the back microphones. So if there's a baby crying in the background, front focus is the way to go. So press the button on the app, you've got rid of all the noise behind you. Doesn't get rid of it completely because noise will, reverberate, so it will come from the front as well. but lots and lots of clever stuff that you can do, and you can tailor it to the person. You know, if they want control, here's the app, these are the buttons you have to press. Or if they just want to go into a restaurant, let the hearing aid do the stuff by itself, then you can program it that way as well.
I mean, we're independent here. Mo and I are independent. It's our job to look at the whole market. We have to know the insides out of every possible hearing aid commercially available. The One of the latest devices released at the end of last year, we were told has a memory, and inside the memory of the hearing aid are 22 million different listening scenarios built in to its chip. So the hearing aid is almost scanning the environment, and as Mo said, it's making decisions based on what it knows, what it's been pre-programmed to understand, and then working with sort of AI formulas, deep neural networks to make the right decisions. So
Yeah, it started off as a baby, let's say, and they've just fed it lots of different situations, lots of noise coming from different directions, different accents, you know, male, female voices, different age, big rooms, small rooms, and they've optimized it for each, you know, environment.
one of the one of the things that Mo and I, probably any audiologist who programs hearing aids comes across every day is people come in and they say, I love my hearing aids, but I don't cope very well in noise. Everything's great until I'm in a restaurant or the family around, or there's lots of extraneous interference. To have hearing aids now that understand that and to make these automatic decisions, to suppress noise, to prioritize speech, I'd say in the last 6 months it's been game changing.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
we set up sort of calibrated speaker systems in the clinic where people come in and they fit their hearing aids and they say, "Oh yeah, it can't be that great." And we activate the noise level, activate the AI features, and people are just absolutely blown away.
It sort of like sets them back a little bit, you know, how this is how it sounds normally. This is how it sounds with AI enabled, and it's a massive difference.
Yeah.
It's a big game changer.
I mean, it must be so exciting for both of you working with patients and having these extra features now that they can have and that you can see just the AI, it kind of it's revolutionizing it really.
Yeah, we see a lot of complicated audiology here as well. So we've got people with really tough hearing losses, and one of the first things we did on or do on the launch of products that we think will really benefit certain clients is invite them back and send them away on trials, and to see some of the more recent reactions to you know, people in tears because they're saying, well, you said it was going to be better. We didn't know it was going to be this much better. And
Mm.
that's been quite more recently. The benefit scores have been significantly higher.
And the other really good thing that we do as well, you know, we can do all the testing in the clinic and it's brilliant, right? But the real kind of challenges are out there, you know, in the real world, in restaurants, at home, when you're watching TV. So we do allow our patients to take them away, you know, try the hearing aids for 4 weeks, see how good they are, you know, make the decision yourself after really trying it in the real world, and then we arrange a review. They come in, and I think that provides a really fair assessment of the technology.
Yeah, we use a lot of analogy with cars. You wouldn't just go into a showroom and buy a car. You'd test drive it for a bit, and that's what we do where we can with our hearing aid systems.
Yeah, in terms of comfort levels then for hearing aids, are there different, I guess different people find different types more comfortable than others or
Yeah, I mean, some people they're very focused on having something that's invisible. A lot of our clients, especially men, sometimes with shorter hair, will come in, meet us for the first time and work on the assumption that they want something that's intracanal, completely invisible, and for sure we can do it. But the best hearing aids are always going to be post-oral.
what does that mean exactly?
Behind the ear, so that you're going to benefit from multi-directional microphones, a way of pairing one ear to the other, and allowing ventilation as well. A lot of people that we meet with hearing loss may have a good part of their hearing, and they may have a weaker part of their hearing. So, being able to keep the ear ventilated is sometimes quite important, so that you preserve the natural sound that the client can hear very well, yet the processor behind the ear can sample the desired levels of amplification that the client needs. So it's like a fusion of natural hearing and amplification. You don't always achieve that as well when you make something that's cosmetic that just goes in
Mm.
the ear. And I think a lot of people make that mistake sometimes.
The thing as well, to add to that, in terms of hearing aid sizes, a lot of people think when they think of a hearing aid, they think of this really big, thing that sits behind the ear. Everyone's probably going to see it, but really that's not the case, and it hasn't been the case for, say, 10 years, 15 years. These days, hearing aids are really, really small. They're so small that when you're wearing them, most people in front of you won't see them. It's if you really, really look and go behind someone's ear, that's when you see the device. So they're really, really comfortable. As Nick said, lots of different types of fittings that we can offer to suit different ear canals, different hearing losses. So it's definitely come a long way, from where it used to be.
I mean, when I've been looking at hearing loss for this episode, something that I found myself thinking about is we don't really think twice about wearing glasses, or, maybe somebody have like a cool pair of glasses. And how far off do you think it might be before we're like, oh, there's a cool pair of hearing aids?
That's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, we're always wanting, like, let's say Louis Vuitton or Gucci to, get in partnership with a hearing aid manufacturer because they've done it with glasses, right? And I think the market will get there. It is becoming more Hearing aids are becoming more and more popular. They maybe in the next 15, 20 years, they can almost become like a fashion accessory as well. Because, you see people wearing their AirPods these days, and a lot of the times, and I do this myself, I'm not really listening to anything. I'm just wearing it because, just in case, right? And it looks cool sometimes for the younger people, they just wear it because it looks nice. So I think maybe, hopefully 15, 20 years, hearing aids are going to become more and more popular. Maybe we get some nice partnerships with the big retailers.
I think that stigmas are breaking down as well. I mean, I've, always been quite surprised to see, especially younger clients who you meet for the first time who are extremely worried about how a how a hearing aid makes them look or how it makes them feel. And you meet them months afterwards and they're ambassadors for hearing aids. I think, once you go through the process of accepting that you need it and you're wearing it, as best we can, we try and make them look as concealed as we can.
Yeah.
But they're a lot better than they used to be.
It's one of these things, like, when you're first thinking about getting them, you got to actually try them. Take them away for 4 weeks, s- see the benefit, and that's when people their mind frame starts to shift. Like, wow, this is actually really, really impressive. I do really need this. And then you sort of start thinking, okay, this is really cool. This is a tech product. I'm going to embrace this, and this is who I am essentially. So it's
Because
very good.
one of the challenges does seem to be, I don't want to say compliance, but actually people wearing them once they have them. So, how do you feel like you do maybe things differently here that your clients are wearing them?
I think, we as Mo's previously mentioned, we heavily endorse no obligation trials to begin with. So this always builds a very trusting relationship to begin with. So we're allowing our client to leave our practice with something that they're in effect going to borrow that's been calibrated and prescribed for them, but it gives us an opportunity to sort of track their progress. So they're going to come back, they're going to let us know how they get on. A lot of, almost all of the modern software packages data log, so we can see how often the clients have been using their hearing aids. If we don't record anything, sometimes people get a bit freaked out and think,
Yeah,
"You've been
yeah,
recording me for a month."
yeah, yeah.
No, not
Because
at all.
it tells you, like, they've been in the restaurant for 20% of the time, and then people start saying, "Oh, how did you know I was there?" But that information is really useful because, if you've been in the restaurant, we can check the levels of noise that you've been exposed to, and we use that information during follow-up appointments to make further adjustments. So it gets more and more tailored for the patient. So it just, improves, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you try and encourage the client to build a routine early on. I don't think it's right for Mo or I or anyone in our position to say, look, you have to wear hearing aids all the time. This is it now. I'm very sorry. That doesn't work. What you do is you encourage someone to build a routine, you track the routine. And I always say to a client at the end of perhaps a trial period, let's fast forward 6 months, because we see our clients every 6 months. Let's fast forward 6 months. Is the routine that we've proven you've been able to create, is it sustainable? Are we going to are we going to see more hours of use in 6 months' time? Because we don't want to see less. We want to see it at this level here. So, having those touch points of reassurance is also really important.
Yeah. Mo, you mentioned very briefly about AirPods. And of course, AirPods were in the news a few months ago because of, I'm going to say, hearing aid features. What's your thoughts on those?
I think it's really good that Apple, such a big company, worldwide, they've talked about hearing loss and, they're giving importance to hearing, which for our industry is amazing. That's one of the things I think in the future is going to help shift the dynamic for hearing loss, essentially. It's going to make it, people are going to want to get their hearing investigated. And again, linking it back to AirPods, I think they're going to offer, hearing tests that you can do from home with your AirPods. So again, it's just raising awareness. And I think that's going to be good for our industry, right?
Oh, massively. Yeah. I mean, I set up a pair of AirPods for my son recently, and I was amazed. I think Apple are making great contributions to um, the world of audiology and hearing loss. Not just by that, but also the dosimetry in the phones, which sort of track how someone is turning their music up too high for too long a period of time. Um, so yeah, a lot of our clients think, "Oh, you must be really worried." Actually, we embrace it.
It's good because, again, it brings awareness. And if someone needs specialist help, they probably won't be able to go to Apple and speak to the tech expert about their audiological needs. So that will prompt them to go and see someone properly. And that's where we step in.
Yeah, and I think this also comes around where hearing your hearing health, how important it is, not just for your ears. So maybe we could speak about that for a moment, about how, looking after your hearing can actually benefit or prevent other areas.
So if I start, I think hearing it kind of ties in with your overall health, as you've said. So let's say you've got a hearing loss and you've decided you don't really want to do anything about it. The first consequence is it will definitely impact your confidence. So if you've got, your family or your friends having a conversation about something, you won't be able to join in in the conversation because you won't have the confidence that you're not going to hear everything and people are going to be, someone might make a joke, you won't know what's being said, you'll just laugh along, but inside you'll know that you haven't really heard what's happening. And then if somebody asks you a question, like a follow-up question, again, you might get it wrong. So it definitely does impact your confidence. And if that keeps happening, then in the long run, you'll start to isolate yourself from these conversations. So you'll think, well, maybe I'm not going to go and see my friends today. Maybe I'll stay home because I don't want to go to that restaurant because it was too difficult for me last time when I went. So confidence, you know, sometimes isolation, these are things that really in the long run aren't great. So, acting sooner rather than later is definitely the advice I would give.
Yeah. So social withdrawal is,
Yeah.
it's a worry. Often the client sees it, or the family see it more first. So very often we have someone who's dragged in by their partner or their spouse. And then more recently, we found some inquiries into our clinic through worried sons or daughters,
Mm.
because they can see it, it becomes obvious, and social withdrawal can lead to cognitive decline. There's a proven link between the two.
So I was really amazed to hear that Professor Said was talking about how, say, diabetes, how that links to cognitive decline and other things, say all around 4 or 5%. And then hearing loss, he said, could be as much as 10% difference. I mean, like, that's huge.
Yeah.
It's a very big statistic, definitely, and it's one of those things that it's quite hidden because you can't actually see someone with hearing loss,
Mm.
right? Because it's not visible. it's affecting your confidence, affects you as a whole, as a person. And cognitive decline is, again, it's not something you can measure like on a daily basis. It happens really, really gradually. One day, you'll develop a problem. It's been tied to things like dementia, for example, which is really, really scary, right? So it's something that you got to act on sooner to kind of prevent these things or lower the risk of these things happening in the future. And getting that message across to people can sometimes be a little bit challenging because, again, there's no way to kind of give them a measurement of how much their, cognitive abilities are declining. And that's something I think the industry needs to work on a little bit.
Yeah, it's very delicate as a subject. It's very easy for us to say, "Oh, you need hearing aids. You got to have them because otherwise you're going to have Alzheimer's, dementia, all these things that people, the scare tactics is not anything that we're going to do." But the recent studies that were published in the Lancet, I think you mentioned the 10%. That was a few years back now. They've helped us because that gained media traction and sort of gives us an opportunity to talk about what we've always really known, but now is proven, that there are links. And, the simple act of wearing a hearing aid can literally change someone's life. The peripheral benefits of wearing a hearing aid are immense.
I think I've got an example of a patient with hearing loss and tinnitus. So tinnitus is when you hear like a ghost sound that nobody else can hear. Sometimes it's like a ringing sound, buzzing sound, and for a lot of people, it's quite concerning because it can be there all the time, right? And often tinnitus and hearing loss can come about like together at the same time. So there's a big, big kind of crossover. And the patient who I've been seeing for the past, I think, 6, 7 months, they've never worn hearing aids before. They didn't really think they had a hearing loss. They just came for tinnitus help. But it ended up that they did have a bit of a high frequency hearing loss. So it's a loss of clarity, basically. And programming a hearing aid to help with the high frequency hearing loss also, indirectly sort of helps with the tinnitus as well. So it manages the tinnitus by something called sound enrichment. So it keeps the brain active and busy. So the brain is concentrating on the hearing aid sound rather than the tinnitus. And effectively doing this can really substantially reduce the tinnitus to the point where hopefully one day it goes away because the brain classifies the tinnitus as something that's not important. It's like a clock ticking, for example. Initially, you hear a new clock ticking. A week down the line, it's still ticking, but you don't hear it because the brain has classified it as something that's not important. And that's the goal we want to do, get towards with tinnitus management, classifying it as not important, and then that really definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, some of my more recent experiences go back to what I was saying before with like technology around AI and people just coming back saying, when they have been to that very busy restaurant or they've been to the pub or wherever, and that they're just listening as they would want to, which they couldn't do before with hearing aids of inferior quality.
Uh, what would you say?
You come in for a hearing test, get your hearing tested properly.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's lots of semi-decent online tests you can do, and that's great. But a proper clinical hearing test in a soundproof booth
Yeah.
with a qualified audiologist to examine the ear before as well, because a lot of what we
Mhm.
do here is removing wax as well.
You could do online hearing tests, but what if your ears are blocked with wax?
Yeah.
You can't look inside your own ears, right? So getting it done properly is really, really important. So looking for stuff like HCPC registration for private, audiologists, or going down to your local NHS audiology clinic is always a good idea as well. So yeah, definitely getting it done properly is really important.
So, Mo, you mentioned there about tinnitus, and I'm wondering, I feel like I'm hearing a lot more about tinnitus these days. So, is this something that is becoming more common, or what are your thoughts on?
So tinnitus obviously has been around for a very, very long time. But I think what's kind of tipped the scales a little bit since COVID, well, during COVID, the usual, everyone's really quite anxious about what's going on. They're stressed because they can't see their family members. They don't know what's happening with work. So all of these things can often lead to tinnitus. So a lot of people have been getting these symptoms because of excess stress, negative emotions and stuff. So it's becoming more and more, people are seeking more and more help for tinnitus since COVID. And we certainly get a lot of young, people here. There's nothing wrong with them. They're perfectly healthy, ears are fine, normal hearing, but they've got tinnitus. And the biggest factor, I would say, one of the biggest factors is stress. It could be work related stress. It could be COVID related stress. COVID led to people getting ill. That causes stress. That could have led to tinnitus. There's so many different things that I think combine. And unfortunately, tinnitus it's getting worse.
So, a lot of people don't know what tinnitus is. They've maybe heard the word, but they're not sure what that is. Could you explain?
Yeah, I mean, tinnitus is a very commonly reported pathology where someone hears a sound that feels like it's in their ears or in their head, but nobody else does. And there's two types of tinnitus: subjective tinnitus and objective tinnitus. The vast majority of people have subjective tinnitus, which is they hear it and no one else does. It can present in many, many different forms. Um, that it could actually be a buzzing sound, it could be a humming noise, it could even be something very repetitive, like a song playing over and over again. Um, uh, and these clients are often very anxious and they're often very stressed because it's something that competes with things that they want to hear. And it's something that maybe is louder at certain times of the day, or if they're stressed, or if they go to sleep at night and there's no other sound to compete with their tinnitus, they're aware of the tinnitus more. Um, I think the vast majority of people who have tinnitus have some form of associated hearing loss, and that sort of is easily managed with hearing aids. Um, it's the ones I think that Mo was speaking about before who have normal hearing and
Mm.
tinnitus that are difficult to.
Yeah, well, sound, but again, sound enrichment, any kind of relaxation sound. So we can program devices to give you a white noise, pink noise. We can even do, I don't know, raindrops. Anything that relaxes you helps towards managing tinnitus. And again, with the technology that we have these days, put the devices on, control it from your phone, from the app. So if you think, okay, today I prefer raindrops, change it. If your tinnitus is really loud, go on your app, put the volume up or down. So it's, it really gives the user a lot of control to manage tinnitus now. If you've got a hearing loss, then it would be with hearing aids programmed as hearing aids plus maskers. So you could do it kind of all in one solution. If someone's got, like, let's say perfect normal hearing, but they've got tinnitus, then you've kind of got two options. If you want to go for like a discrete look, then you can go for a really miniature, behind the ear hearing aid that you can control with the phone. But we wouldn't program it as a hearing aid. We would just use it for masking. Um, Other people think, okay, I'll just stick with my headphones. I'm comfortable with my headphones, whether it's in ear, behind the ear, doesn't really matter, as long as they can find the right sounds. And these days, there are loads of apps that you can use to find relaxation sounds.
Some of the best outcomes we have, I think, with tinnitus, where there's an associated hearing loss, is the simple act of wearing a hearing aid. You tell the brain by the activation of the hearing aid that everything's okay. The auditory system relaxes, and as a consequence, the tinnitus dissipates. And that's always, I think, a great moment when you switch a hearing aid on for the first time, when someone says, "Wow, I'm hearing better," and actually my tinnitus
Yeah,
is massively reduced, or in some cases even gone.
gone. Yeah,
So
it's the stimulation, the initial stimulation. Very often people say, "Oh wow, my tinnitus has completely gone away." It once you get used to the sound, it does slowly start coming back again, but then prolonged use of the hearing aid or the masking device does kind of get the tinnitus going down again.
Yeah, and probably gives person relief. Sometimes I wonder, do we wait too long in life to give ourselves some relief? Think that you have to just grin and bear it. It must have patients who come in and they feel, because when you mentioned about stress, it's difficult, isn't it, if you are feeling stressed and somebody says to you, like, "Oh, don't stress." I'm stressed that I'm stressed. But you know what I mean, though, and how we kind of um, trick our brains in a way, because the brain is amazing. But like you said, if you can get the brain to not focus on the sound or to discard it, it's not something necessary to expend any brain energy on.
you know, relaxing the auditory system calms tinnitus. We've spoken about how the simple act of using a hearing aid can calm tinnitus if there's as an associated hearing loss. But sometimes we speak to our patients about um, activities like yoga or Pilates, or any, or even certain counseling therapies. We often refer some of our very anxious patients to a hearing psychologist who may look at mindfulness techniques and cognitive behavioral therapy as part of a package of relieving tension.
And the thing as well with tinnitus management, if you've got tinnitus, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and get a masking device. So it's not like hearing loss, where if you have a hearing loss, you do need help and you do need to wear a hearing aid. If you've got tinnitus, a lot of the times, if it's really, really mild, just normal environmental sounds can mask the tinnitus. So, some of the advice we would give to our patients with very mild tinnitus would be like, maybe leave the window open or leave the radio running in the background. Anything to kind of just sound enrichment basically helps. So it's not necessarily tinnitus, oh, go and get a masking device.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do to kind of enrich yourself with sounds will help.
And also sometimes, just removing wax. It
Yeah.
is, if tinnitus can be a byproduct of a hearing loss and someone has wax in their ears, and going back to COVID times when people didn't feel comfortable leaving their homes and having someone look in their ear, during some of the restrictions when they were lifted, we'd see people and they just have complete blockages.
Yeah. That's the best like relief, because they've been suffering with tinnitus and you think, oh, okay, this might be a bit difficult. Look inside their ears, full of wax, take the wax out, within a minute tinnitus is gone. And it's a real game changer. It's a nice feeling to provide that service for someone.
So moving on from tinnitus to hearing loss prevention, because if there is something that we can do, obviously, to preserve our hearing before we have hearing loss, that would be great. So, have you got any tips or help that you can?
So the first thing I guess worth mentioning is everyone will probably get some kind of hearing loss. So, as you get older, your little hair cells in the cochlea, wear and tear kind of does result in a bit of hearing loss over time. The things you can do to help yourself. So let's say you go to loud concerts, for example, and you're going every other week or whatever. You got to protect your ears. So wear ear defenders, earplugs. So here we can make custom earplugs with different filters. So if you're going to a football match, you might put on a medium filter. If you're going to a rock concert, you might put on the deep, blocking filter. So protecting your ears from loud sounds, definitely, I'd say number one in priority. Would you agree?
Oh, massively. I mean, you're going to start to see in the years ahead. We see the children now and teenagers using headphones more and more, and we hope and we think that, you know, the volume isn't elevated too much, but in reality, we don't really know. And I think that, you know, as generations come and go, and thankfully now legislation around loud noise at work, you know, if you work in a factory or if you have a noisy job, you know, you have to be protected. That's, you know, employment law.
Mm.
But you know, so those sort of that generation of noise-induced hearing loss is declining through work, but through recreational damage, I think that's on the increase. And I think if we fast forward, you know, in the years ahead, that will be a big part of our job. So strategies now in which, you know, smartphone manufacturers can help have some form of dosimetry within their products to track, you know, how loud the presentation of the volume is, to tell the user that maybe you've had enough for today, maybe turn it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I think is really important. Anything that can help.
The other thing I think to add as well, maybe from a different angle, a lot of people these days are trying to like remove wax themselves. Like there's devices that are being shipped from all over the world, and it's really not safe doing that yourself. And we've seen cases where people have attempted to remove wax. And if you think about your ear canal, it's really, really small. And if you've got a big lump of hard, dry wax and you try and remove it yourself without, you know, seeing what you're doing, you can essentially push the wax through the eardrum, and that's going to lead to hearing loss. So, you know, definitely advised to go and see a professional if you're experiencing problems with your hearing, especially if you think you've got wax.
I mean, I listen to that and I think, oh my goodness, who would do that? But then if we're being honest, and you're online and it's like, oh, solution for hearing wax. Oh, that's only 10 quid. Okay, I'll do that. Can I ask you about earbuds? You know, when you're putting it
Definitely.
what?
No.
Yeah, look, the only thing you should be putting into your ears, probably oil, you know, any kind of ear drops to soften the wax. But when it has softened, don't try and take it out yourself. Go and see someone who knows how to take it out. You know, before, I don't know, say 10, 15 years ago, it would be done with irrigation, where you put high pressured water into your ear canal and it would, you know, get the wax to flow out. Nowadays, we use microsuction. So really, really small, tiny device, little vacuum cleaner for the ears, basically. And we look through a microscope, so we see a lot of detail when we're doing the procedure. So it's really safe for the patient and it's really quick and easy as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I can think of a couple of instances myself when you were talking about, did you call them hearing defenders? Is that, yeah, I like the name of that. Where I can't imagine I'm the only one, but I will get alerts on my watch. If I'm in the shower, sometimes my watch will tell me the noise I'm reaching X decibels, or drying my hair with the hair dryer. I'm getting a warning on my watch telling me this is too loud. So in these scenarios, is this something that you can wear?
Yeah, I mean, you know, damage to the organ of hearing through loud noise is not always about one event, it's about a duration. So it's like, you know, you're getting an alert through using a hairdryer, your phone or your smartwatch is, you know, responsibly telling you that something's very loud, but that's not going to cause hearing damage. However, if you stood there for hours on end, you know, that's where it becomes different. Like that the man who works in a factory for one day is not going to have hearing damage. The man who works in a factory for 20 years is you know, it chips away over
Yeah.
time. That's probably the way to think about it. But it is good that, you know, smart technology is telling us about sound levels around us.
Okay, but that's good to know though that we shouldn't get too stressed because obviously this is the thing with data feedback is that amazing on one level, on the other level as a consumer sometimes it can add to your stress because
Yeah, I mean, I had a client, you know, only last week who was very worried about the sound levels of her experience when she went to the cinema. The cinema can be a really noisy place. In fact, some of our clients don't need their hearing aids in the cinema. That's how intense it is. But if you're watching a film for 2 or 3 hours, it's okay. And the client was saying, should I not go to the cinema? And it's like, go to the cinema, enjoy the experience. But if you were to do that every day, then of course, you know, That's
Yeah, it's
where it
just doing
becomes.
it responsibly, doing it in moderation, basically. You don't want to get to the stage where you're stressing every time there's a loud sound. Put your earplugs in, take them out. You know, going out, if there's an ambulance, you put your earplugs in. You don't want to get to that because that will lead you to become really anxious and really stressed. And we know that can also lead to tinnitus as well. So, you want to avoid stuff like that. Just do everything normally, but be mindful that prolonged exposure to loud noise can result in, hearing deterioration.
Yeah, and also to just dispel some myths around loud noise and hearing aids. Hearing aids aren't interested in loud noise. Modern hearing aids don't care about loud noise, they care about soft inputs. So, if someone's wearing a hearing aid and there's a very loud sound, the hearing aid will compress loud sounds. But if there's a bird singing in the tree or someone speaking softly, that's where the hearing aid will sample and amplify. A lot of people worry about when they wear hearing aids that they're going to damage their hearing more. Definitely doesn't work like that.
Good. Okay, that's really interesting. Can I ask you as well about water and your ears and hearing? So, is it dangerous for water if you're swimming underwater or in the shower, water getting in your ears? Here I am sharing all my paranoias. Is that bad for your?
So yeah, I mean, when you go swimming, if your ear, sometimes you can have sensitive ears, right? It's like you can get sensitive skin and you just have to tailor your skincare routine to match your skin. Sometimes with ears, if you go, if you swim, you can get ear infections. And if you are one of those guys, who do get ear infections, then wearing custom made swim plugs would definitely be the right way to go. Most people, to be honest, I don't think use plugs, and it's absolutely fine. Obviously don't do anything silly, like, I don't know, don't get a high pressured shower and try and clean your ear with the water, because that's going to stress the eardrum a little bit. You might be getting some of the wax out, but if you keep doing that, it's going to put the eardrum under a lot of stress and pressure, and that's not going to be good in the long run.
I think another thing to mention as well is when there's wax in the ear, water gets in the ear and gets trapped behind the wax. That's when you can get ear infections, like external ear canal infections, where the water will stagnate behind the wax and then the bacteria will grow. And that's when we see people come in and we often have to refer to ear, nose, and throat or back to their GP for medication. So I think having some sort of regimen of maybe getting someone to look in your ear, every now and again, just to make sure that ear is clean so it can drain. An ear is meant to drain by design so that when we tilt our head, water comes out. If there's wax in an ear canal, sometimes water doesn't drain. Um, so that's often something I think people don't um, understand so well, and also the reason why people will go on holiday and often come back with ear infections because they'll do something outside of their norm and go swimming every day or go into a pool which might be slightly dirty and then come back. We see a lot of people who come back from holiday with
Yeah,
ear infections with the
definitely.
wax all along.
And sometimes it's not a proper swimming pool that they'll, dive into. It might be, something else. So, if you're going to be doing those sorts of activities, definitely consider custom earplugs when you're going on holiday.
Yeah, definitely when you read about some of these surge challenges in the water surrounding the UK.
Yeah.
Um, but so so I wanted to then just ask you, so with uh sorry, well I went off my own train of thought there on hearing hearing aid.
Those were your questions, weren't they? The person who
I'm like, is this bad for my ears? Getting wet all the time. But it's really helpful to know because when are we being paranoid? And I suppose what I was really thinking in my head was, I mean, I don't think anything about going and having my eyes checked once a year. This is a routine, and I have noticed myself from just doing it that every year you go, it's better because now the practitioner has more data to work with because they know what your normal is as such, and they can then see if there is a change.
Yeah.
Um, would you encourage that for people just having, say, in the same way that I go for, an eye checkup, that somebody goes for a hearing checkup each year?
We do we promote ear health checks. They're very short appointments. They don't take up much time. People come in, we'll examine the ear. We use video otoscopy, so we take pictures of the ears. We show the client there's no wax. The client is still worried. We often do screening checks of the hearing, and it's a service that we provide for the communities where our clinics are, so that again, it's all about touch points of care, and we think that's important.
Definitely. I think the older you get, the more important it is to get your hearing checked on a regular basis. Doesn't mean come in every month or every 6 months. You might start off getting a hearing test every 3 years, um, change it then to every 2 years, and then I think maybe over the age of 55, maybe get it checked more regularly, like maybe once a year, year and a half or whatever, just to stay on top of it. Chances are you've probably got a little bit of a hearing loss. You may not need a hearing aid with that hearing loss, but if you keep monitoring it, then you'll know, okay, maybe now's the time I need to get some professional help with hearing aids.
And someone who acquires a hearing aid from our clinics has their hearing tested every year, no matter what. It's number one rule really on an aftercare every year. We on aftercare visit every year we want to retest the hearing,
Absolutely.
because if the hearing changes, that changes the parameters of the hearing aid setting. So it's really important.
Just one last question I have around the hearing, around wax in the ears. So if you are wearing, like I would notice, and I don't know if this is very common, but if I wear um, AirPods or any kind of headphones more, I would notice I get a little bit more wax in my ears. Is that quite common? Yeah.
The dead skin of the ear migrates outwards. So when we have an activity which stops the flow by forcing something in our ears, then often the wax can build up in places where something rests. For example, someone who wears sleep plugs. We often see people who wear sleep plugs or other forms of plugs or hearing aids even create more wax.
Yeah, as Nick said, the skin's growing from the eardrum and it's growing outwards. So for my ear on the right, it's growing out this way. And then throughout the day, throughout the night, it's supposed to just kind of excrete itself. And if you're blocking up your ears with AirPods, especially in the ear ones, then it's going to kind of stop that from happening properly. And that's when you can get some wax problems.
Can I ask just one last question that you have also triggered is around when you're wearing, so if you're on a flight, the noise level can be quite loud. So if you put on just your regular AirPods, you probably have to up that volume really high in order to hear properly because of the noise, unless you have the noise cancelling headphones. Uh, is that is that okay wearing, like, noise canceling headphones in terms of your hearing? Because then I noticed that you can keep the volume much lower.
Yeah, noise cancelling headphones, especially something, I think like the cups over the ear, I mean, gold standard really, because noise cancelling will mean that your volume of what you're streaming doesn't need to compete with the extraneous noise. So you'll be less inclined to want to turn it up. So yeah, there's huge advantages to having noise cancelling headsets, because as a consequence of having noise cancelling, the level of volume will reduce.
Yeah, definitely. Don't think I've got anything to add, but yeah, a lot of people when they listen to music, you want that good like feeling of the bass and stuff, right? Especially if you're on an aeroplane, you're not going to get that. So noise cancellation just really is a game changer. It definitely helps. It lets you enjoy music again properly without presenting sounds really loud.
Brilliant. Thank you. So to finally, I thought maybe we could chat a little bit about teleaudiology and what that is. Maybe you could explain that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a emerging part of our uh, role, I guess. Most hearing aids now there will be a way in which we can interact with the hearing aids at distance. Our central London clinic here, we're blessed to see people come see us from all over the world, and that's great. And I had a remote session this morning, first thing, with someone in Australia who was very happy with the hearing aids she collected when she was here in London several weeks ago, but wanted a few adjustments. Obviously, to come over to the UK is not an option, so I accessed her hearing aids through distance. She sees me on her hearing aid app. I see her on my PC. She tells me that she's very happy with her hearing aids, but perhaps would like them a little bit louder. There are certain situations where she felt that they could be improved. I sent the adjustments to the hearing aids, and I guess at some point in the next few weeks we'll have a follow up. Um, it's great, and it's a big thing, and I think that over the years ahead, it will be it will. I'm not going to say it would change the way we work, but it will be a very assistive tool. Problem is with teleaudiometry, you can't look in an ear
Mm.
and you can't get someone in a soundproof booth to do a hearing test. So it takes an element of control away from us. But are we for it? 100%. And we've embraced it.
It's definitely something that adds to the portfolio. It's not gonna, you won't be able to get rid of face-to-face appointments. You know, that's the most important thing. You can look inside someone's ears, you can physically inspect their devices. Because let's say, for example, you have a remote session and the patient saying, I'm not hearing very well, can you turn the volume up? The problem might not be the volume, it might be that the microphone is maybe blocked on the hearing aid. And you can only inspect stuff like that face to face, essentially. You know, you need the machines to clean out the hearing aids properly and stuff. So it adds a tool for benefit, but definitely I don't think it will replace face to face consultations.
Okay, but a good addition to the portfolio. Well, listen, thank you both so much. I have learned so much. I'm hoping all the viewers and listeners will have too. I guess finally, just if there was anything that you're very particularly excited about in this arena, because it feels like there's so many options and great solutions for everybody now. Yeah, was there anything that you're both, maybe May, I'll start with you, anything particularly excited about?
I'm really quite into like tech and how it combines with healthcare. So I'm first of all, I'm really excited with how AI is going to properly influence hearing aids. And I know we've got AI in hearing aids already, but I think this is obviously just the first step. We're hearing of, new AI advances nearly every month now, big, giant leaps in technology. So I want to see, I'm really excited for the next 5 years, how it's going to change the hearing aid industry. Um, yeah, I think that's the one for me, really.
I'm really excited about Auracast, which is perhaps a few years away, maybe less, where um, you would walk into for example, theatre or a cinema, and it will replace the traditional loop system. The modern hearing aid will be able to link into the performance at distance. So someone who sits in the back row of the theatre would be hearing the performances as if it were right there. And that's not something that telecoils loop systems can't perform now, but they don't always do it well. Loop systems aren't always turned on, for example. Or I went to a local church recently where the vicar was wearing a microphone turned upside down, so the congregation wearing hearing aids would have heard his feet, not what he's saying. So it's open to error. Auracast would change this if you have an Auracast ready hearing aid. And we think it's going to be even on a bigger scale, that you would walk into perhaps an airport with your hearing aids, and the hearing aids will tell you what gate to go to, and all the things that sound almost sort of sci-fi.
Yeah, it's coming. It's definitely going to be here. The thing, just touching on my point about the AI stuff, like imagine you're wearing hearing aids and you go to a foreign country and it's translating the speech for you live, straight away. I don't think we're far off from stuff like that. And obviously that doesn't just apply to hearing aids, it's for headphones and stuff as well. But it's really, really exciting, the technology advances.
And also, I think, I always retain enthusiasm about the hearing aid in the center of a portfolio of other tools that we can always implement. There isn't anything that we can't deal with. For example, remote microphones that you can put in the middle of a table. So if you're around a big boardroom scenario, and the limitation of a modern hearing aid or any hearing aid is always distance. So there's always things that we can use to help, um, break down barriers for distance, and things you can plug into TVs and PCs that stream wirelessly. So all exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Listen, thank you both so much. I've learned so much this afternoon, and yeah, watch this space.
Oh, well, thank you as well.
Thank you, Susan.